In my last video, we talked about why it's important to understand the Constitution, especially as we're approaching America's 250th anniversary. But there's another question that naturally comes after that. What was it exactly that made this country work in the first place? Because it didn't just happen, and it definitely didn't happen because everybody agreed. There are so many contradictions and opinions being pushed today that it actually pushed me to go back and study the history for myself by actually going to the original sources and the founding documents. And what I've discovered is this: if you go back and actually read the history, there was a lot of disagreement. Some of it thoughtful, but some of it got very personal. A good example of this is John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. If you read about those campaigns, they were brutal. There were accusations, personal attacks, a lot of division, and yet those same men helped build something that lasted. Later in life, they reconciled and they became close friends. And one of the real fascinating parts of the story is that they both died on July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. A lot of people saw meaning in that. And whether someone agrees with that or not, I think it's a good reminder of why history matters. Not just so we don't repeat mistakes, but because history gives us perspective. And that gives me hope. Because when you understand how something started, you begin to understand what actually holds it together. So instead of repeating everything from the last video, let me share a few foundational ideas that help shape this country, and they're probably the reason it's still standing today. So the first idea is rights come from God, not government. The first thing that really made America different was the idea that rights come from God, not from government. And that was a major shift in thinking, because for most of history, rights came from rulers. A king decided what freedoms people had. Government decided what people could say, what they could own, and what they were allowed to do. And those rights, they could change at any time. What made America different was the idea that certain rights already existed, that they came from our Creator. See, it states in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. From its founding, America was built on the belief that government didn't create those rights. Government's responsibility was and is to protect them. Now, whether people fully understand the significance of that or not, that idea, it shaped everything. It shaped our laws, it shaped the Constitution, it shaped the role of government itself. Because if rights come from government, then government can redefine them. But if rights come from God, then government is not the source of those rights. It is responsible for protecting them. And I think that's very important to think about today. And the reason is that when people are talking about rights now, listen carefully to what's underneath the conversation. Are rights being described as God-given or government-given? Because those are two completely different worldviews, and they lead to very different outcomes. The second idea is the system was designed for participation. One thing I think we forget is this: our system was never designed to run on autopilot. It was designed with the expectation that people would stay involved. That's really what we, the people, means. Not just that people matter, but that people carry responsibility. For a long time, Americans understood that much more clearly than now. People were taught civics early. As children, they learned how government worked, why the Constitution mattered, and what the branches of government actually did. That was considered part of preparing someone for life. But see, over time, we've drifted away from that. More often than not now, people have to pursue that understanding on their own. And here's the problem. If you don't understand how something is supposed to work, it becomes very difficult to protect it or improve it or even recognize when something feels off. And historically, many, if not most of the people serving in government, they weren't lifelong politicians. They were people with businesses, families, farms, and professions. They stepped in for a season because they believed they had a responsibility to contribute. That is a very different mindset than what we often see today. The third idea is the goal was never perfection, it was improvement. There's one more thing that stands out when you read the founding documents. The goal was never perfection, it was improvement. There's a phrase in the preamble that says, in order to form a more perfect union. Not a perfect union, a more perfect one. That tells you immediately that our founders understood the country would need growth, it would need correction and refinement over time. And history proves that. The Civil War, it was devastating. Hundreds of thousands of lives were lost during one of the most painful periods in American history. Much of it centered around slavery, human equality, and freedom. But as difficult as that season was, it moved our country closer to the principles it was founded on. And that's history we don't want to forget, because sometimes people look at problems and they immediately assume everything is broken beyond repair. But maybe the better question is, what needs to be understood better? What needs to be corrected? And then how do we move forward responsibly? Because improvement requires participation. It requires people willing to think, learn, engage, and contribute, not just react emotionally to everything they see. And when you take a step back and look at it, this country was never held together because everybody agreed. They didn't. What held it together were the ideas underneath it. Ideas strong enough to hold it together with very different people with very different opinions. Ideas that help guide the country through difficult seasons. And that's rare. So as we move toward our 250th anniversary, I don't think this is just a season for fireworks and celebration. I think it's a season for understanding, to take a little time and read the source documents for yourself. Read the preamble, read the Constitution, read the Declaration of Independence. Because if we don't understand these ideas, we can't protect them. We can't participate in them well, and we can't pass them on to the next generation. And that responsibility doesn't belong to somebody else, it belongs to each of us. I'm Jane and Craig, and know this, success is not about luck or chance, it's about alignment with true principles and taking responsibility to understand them.